I'm Kristin Omdahl and welcome back to Cooking Live with Kristin. Today I'm going to make a couple of dishes that I'm planning for the weekend here. It's Friday, happy Friday, and I'm making some pineapple salsa and a pork dish in the slow cooker, and I'm also making some scones. And I thought that I would juggle working on all three of those and maybe answering some questions live. When this live stream goes to recording, I will share my recipes for everything that I'm making today in the video description. You won't have to go anywhere else. And let's see, skip ads. Nope, that's not what I wanted. I needed to go to, I'm trying to get to the video on my computer too, so that I can read all of the comments. Let's see, I'm live, Marlon, FYI. Don't do anything crazy, is what that really means. Hi Thea, good morning, thanks for joining. Okay, so I am going to take my glasses off. What I'm going to do is try to get things prepped here. I want the oven to be preheated to 400 degrees. And that's for the, that is for the scones. So if you are just joining me now, welcome. I'm making a couple of dishes, and I picked some things that I thought could be made at the same time because you know I like to be efficient with my time. So I'm going to be making slow cooker pork roast with pineapple and garlic and onion and orange juice, which is so yummy, and we add a little cinnamon in the one that I make. It's kind of a Mexican take on pork roast, and while I'm going to set that up once I get the scones started. The scones are going to take the most amount of time. So we're going to do scones, pineapple salsa, and pork roast. So if you have questions, please always feel welcome to leave them in the live comments, because even if I'm busy making stuff, I can always come back and scroll up and watch. I'm going to start by grabbing my butter. I like to freeze my butter when I make scones because the colder you can keep the dough, the less spreading there is of your dough when it's in the oven. So I freeze a stick of butter, and I'm going to use my microplaner. I have heard that you can do this with a grater as well, but I find that the microplaner gives us such a fine, fluffy, snow-like texture for the butter that I feel like it just works a little bit better for the scones. And anytime something is smaller, it incorporates into the dough that much more efficiently. And my grater, or my microplaner, is so sharp that I find that it's really easy to shred the butter on here. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so we'll grab bigger one here, and I can read comments while I'm doing this. Hi Sandra and Thea and Lily and Creative Cleverness, or N2 Crochet. I'm not sure what the name is there, but hello and thanks for joining. I'm starting by I'm going to start my scone dough first. We make the dough, and then we chill the dough and preheat the oven at the same time. And while all of that's going on, I will work on the other things that I'm making today, including pineapple salsa and a Mexican-inspired pork roast. I think I cut my thumb a little bit on the grater. So one thing that I would say, be awfully careful when you're using a microplaner. They are so incredibly sharp. They're sharper than other, at least the one that I have is sharper than anything I've ever used before. As you may remember, this isn't the first time I've cut myself doing this, but yeah, it's not bad. And I just need to pay closer attention. Hi Trina. Yes, everything's going to be yummy. Last week I like to make a couple versions of a recipe before I share my recipes. And I had already done the berry version of the scone recipe last week. And I was getting ready to do a savory version of it as well. And I slowly cooked a nice batch of bacon. I was going to do bacon and scallions and cheddar cheese and some other things. And overnight, Marlon found, let's see, maybe I need to put a towel underneath this. overnight, Marlon found the cooked bacon in the fridge, and he's like, ooh, nice, a snack. So didn't get to do the savory version the following day, but this recipe that I'm going to show you for making scones, everything can be easily modified from sweet to savory. The only difference would be to omit the vanilla extract and to reduce the amount of sugar. You could even skip the sugar, I suppose. I'm thinking about putting on my oven mitt for finishing this up. Or maybe not paying attention to the camera as much. Really do need to focus when you're doing something this sharp. And because the butter is hard, it means you're having to push a little bit harder. It is working though. Look at how beautiful and fluffy that butter is in there. Isn't that gorgeous? I really, really love the texture that happens here. And this ends up being the most time-consuming part of the entire recipe. But again, it's what gives them that amazing texture. Hey Marlon, what'd you think of my scones last week?
Those are fantastic.
I know, right?
I ate all of them.
Were they the best scones you've ever had? I mean, they weren't crumbly at all. They were soft and moist. Like, they were amazing, right? Yeah. Yeah, so I had one or two, I want to say, and I put the rest of them in a package or in a container on the counter, and I told Marlon, hey, when you get home from work tonight, I made scones. And in the morning, it was empty. So apparently he liked them. What's a better compliment than that, though, right? Okay, we're down to just a tiny little bit here. Let's see what I can get done. I'm not gonna go that low, that much. I feel like I would cut myself, so I'm gonna put it with the butter in the fridge. Okay, and my thumb has stopped. I think I just scratched my thumb. I don't think I actually cut it, so looks like we're good there. Maybe not. Okay, so we'll continue with the recipe for the scones and then come back to the other things that we're making today. Okay, so I did tell you that I am making a sweet version, so we are going to add sugar in mine. And those of you who have been following me a while know how much I prefer brown sugar to white sugar. Anytime I can substitute brown sugar for white sugar, I feel like it just gives a little bit of a depth of the flavor, or even doing demerara or raw sugar. But today I'm going to use brown sugar and some flour. All right, this recipe calls for 2 cups of flour, and I'm just going to combine everything together in the one container, in the one bowl. I think we start with 1/2 cup. Yeah, so I'm adding 1/2 cup of brown sugar. If you were making savory, you could reduce this to 2 tablespoons, or maybe even reduce it all the way down to 0. Depends on what kind of a savory scone you're doing. There's any questions while I'm going here. Let's see, where is it? There it is. Okay, so we'll add 2 cups of flour. I think I've got 2 cups in here. If not, I have more containers of flour. Okay, there's the flour. Need to get that in the bag too. All right, I'm going to need an egg, and I think I need to get okay, we need 2 teaspoons of baking powder and some vanilla. Let's see, what else am I pulling out of here? All right, we're gonna add a little, let's see. All right, we're gonna add a little bit of salt. You could add up to a half a teaspoon. I use a salt grater, or salt grinder, so just a couple of grinds. Then add 2 teaspoons of baking powder. The whole recipe will be included in the video description when we're all done here. This is a little bit crumbly, so I'm gonna smash it up here along the side of the bowl just to make sure we get all that out. Oh, and you know what? I'm gonna put some gloves on to protect my hands. Since I scraped my finger, it's also a good idea to wear a glove, but because I don't want to mess up my nails as I touch this buttery goodness. Okay, so we've got our butter, flour, sugar, baking powder, and salt in there. And now we're going to add our wet ingredients. I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. I like to use real vanilla extract. You can use whatever you prefer. You could skip it altogether if you wanted to as well. And then we'll add an egg. And how much cream? And a half a cup of cream. I like to start with a half a cup because I don't like to make my dough too liquidy, but if this doesn't bring the whole dough together, I can always add a little bit extra, 1 tablespoon at a time. And it kind of just depends on the day. Like sometimes it could be depending on the humidity, or maybe I misjudged my calculations. Sometimes you can overjudge your flour or between your dry and wet ingredients, but it's starting to come together already. See how it's starting to get crumbly? Okay, hold on 1 second. I need to go put a Band-Aid on my thumb and then I'll put another glove on. That wasn't working. Okay, that's done. All right, next what I wanted to show you is that instead of continuing to mix this until it comes together, when something has that much butter in it and it starts to get crumbly like that, that's when you can start combining it with your hands. What you want to do is squeeze the whole thing together, and look at, as I'm squeezing it, it is starting to come together. I want to show you one more time. See how it's becoming more of a mixture now? And I like to mix the dough together initially once before adding my fruit. Now I'm going to be adding mixed fruit to mine. I like to add it frozen, but if you wanted to add fresh fruit, you would also want to take into consideration how much moisture is in that as well. All right, so I'm going to add about a cup of frozen mixed berries right out of the bag. Whoops. When I'm adding mixed berries, I try to avoid strawberries because they're so big. I prefer to use smaller pieces. If I were to add strawberries to this, I would want to cut them up first. So the raspberries and the blueberries in this particular mix are smaller and a little more bite-sized. If you're using bigger fruit, I would definitely want to cut it up. So like strawberries, you would definitely want to cut them up to add them in here. And you could add fresh fruit, you could add canned fruit, you could do canned peaches if you wanted, but I would just make sure that you get a lot of that moisture out first. You don't want to really change the texture and the moisture level of your dough because you're adding something that's got more moisture to it. Okay, I've got my dough combined now. You can see here, and what we're going to do is place this on a, I'm going to put it on the counter with a little bit of flour. Let's grab our flour again. What I want to do is shape it into a circle, like a pie shape, or pie or cake shape. Hopefully you can see that on the counter. No, I'm going to have to scoot back for you to see it on the counter, or scoot the camera back. Of course, my hands are a mess. Let's see if I do that. Can you see where I'm at? There we go. Okay, so I want to get this into a circular shape, and I put flour on the counter first. I'm just adding a little flour to the counter so it doesn't stick. Okay, so I'm keeping it at least a good inch thick and in a round shape, and now I can grab, rinse my hands off a little bit. If I didn't have gloves on right now, all of that stickiness would be going under my nails, and I find it's a lot easier to wash my hands and a heck of a lot easier to wash my gloves than it is to wash my nails. So anytime I can avoid that with gloves, I do. Let's see, we will grab a baking sheet. I know this isn't a big dish, but I do find that putting some space between our slices will help them to bake because it does spread a little bit. We are going to avoid some of the spreading by putting this back in the freezer. I guess we don't need this. We've got a silicone sheet. I've got a silicone sheet on my baking dish already. So I'm going to take my dough here that's shaped like a pie shape. I'm going to cut it into 8 pieces. As you can see, the dough is pretty firm. It is staying together. And you'll see that when I can take each slice out now and actually place it on the cookie sheet. Is that showing up on camera too? Wonderful. So then when I put them on the cookie sheet, I like to invert them. I'll show you what I mean in a second. So I did those point facing up. The next set I'll do point facing down, just to try to and keep things efficient on my cookie sheet. And then after this, we will be putting these in the fridge to chill for another 15 minutes. And while they're chilling, we can start working on something else. And we will clean this off the counter. All right, we'll come through that one more time, but that's a good start. Okay, I want to show you what these look like now. So we've got our triangle shapes and they're ready to chill. So I'm going to put them back in the fridge for another 15 minutes. I do have my oven already preheated because I felt like time was of the essence today. So just in case that's going to take longer than 15 minutes to preheat, I decided to put them to preheat it first. And because I've got a lot going on that I didn't have to forget about, I am going to leave my cream out because I am going to brush the scones with a little bit of cream before I throw them in the oven. Next up, let's get our pork roast started. I have a pork roast here that I have thawed in the refrigerator overnight. I think I put it in there yesterday morning. I'm going to pull it out of its wrapper. I like to take, I don't want this on there either. Take this off. Okay, I believe this is 2 pounds of meat. We'll double check on the package here. Yep, it's a 2-pound pork loin. This is a kind of a dish that I do with pork loin, pork shoulder. It really doesn't matter. I like to make a really tender meat, and I like to add a lot of fresh ingredients to it. So we're going to start with some pineapple and some orange juice and an onion. Looks like there's a couple of spots I want to cut out of here first. And I did buy my pineapple already peeled and cored yesterday, just because it was on sale. Normally I do buy it and do it myself. But if it goes on sale, I don't mind taking the break from doing the labor. And I'm just cutting it into like 1-inch cubes. You see there? And we'll toss that in with the pork. And I'm going to cut an onion about the same size. This is a sweet onion. You can use whatever kind of onions you like. I usually gravitate towards the sweet onions at the store, but sometimes I like red onions for the color, and we'll be using a red onion later today when we make the pineapple salsa. Which I have to say, the pineapple salsa is a great accompaniment to this particular pork dish if you're making tacos or nachos or anything, but it's also wonderful as a snack with chips, which I plan on doing both this weekend. Okay, so I've cut my onion into about a 1/2-inch dice, and I'm going to throw that in the slow cooker with the pineapple and the pork. I'm going to take a full head of garlic and literally just cut the whole thing in half. Like that, and throw that in there. Then we will grab a little bit of orange juice, about a 1/2 cup. I'm going to eyeball it, but you would want to do about a 1/2 cup. Just to get the liquid started. And then I add a little bit of cinnamon. I would say about a teaspoon. And about a teaspoon of salt. And a little bit of pepper. Okay, put the lid on there. And put it on high. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second and see what kind of questions that have been coming up. My computer won't acknowledge my thumbprint because I have a glove on. How convenient. Well, I mean, that is actually good for security. Okay. Yes, oh, Thea's sharing what I'm doing. Yes, I am making mixed berry scones, Mexican style pork roast in the slow cooker, and pineapple salsa. Ah, Lily made my pineapple salsa for her kid's birthday and everybody loved it. I am so glad to hear that. You can interchange the pineapple for anything else you might like in there. I've done it with mangoes. I've done it with tangerines. You can take any fruit, and basically what you're doing is making salsa and substituting the tomatoes for something else, right? So even when you're making pineapple salsa, it really is a lot like traditional tomato salsa, but we're substituting the tomato for something else. And it's so fun and so different, and oftentimes you surprise people, and they don't, not only do you surprise them with how good it is, but you surprise them with something they didn't think about before. So all the way around, I love doing that. Okay, so I guess we will get started on the pineapple salsa. There's a few components to this as well, and the scone should be, they've got a few more minutes to chill in the fridge, but it is worth it to, Yeah, tropical fruits in salsa are always good. I agree. Did I put the garlic in with the skins on? Yes, when I use garlic for a lot of flavor and you like to just cut the whole garlic head in half like I showed you and put the whole thing in with a pork roast or something like that, it works really well. And the skins stay intact and I can just pull the whole thing out. If I wanted to keep the garlic and puree it into the sauce, I could squeeze it out kind of like with roasted garlic and remove the skins. But with the skins being just cut in half like that, they're mostly intact and they are easy to remove from the sauce at the end. Kat makes scones once a week. They're a lot easier than you might think. Yes. Okay, next I'm going to start making my salsa. So I'm going to pull out my favorite chopper. You can find this in my Amazon shop. Amazon.com/shop/Kristin Omdahl. You're welcome, Barbara. All right. This comes with 2 different sizes of chopping components in there. So there's the 1/2-inch dice and the 1/4-inch dice. And I feel like the 1/2-inch dice is really nice for bigger pieces of fruit like this. And sometimes I'll do if I'm doing onions and other sharper savory items, I'll do those with a smaller dice. But the fruit, I feel like the fruit falls apart too much if I do it in a smaller dice than this. So we're gonna do can't seem to find the smaller dicer for the onions. I might have to do those by hand. See, it doesn't matter what kind of tools you have, it matters if you know where your tools are, right? Oh, there it is. Found it. Okay, good. All right, so it's this size dicer that I'll use for the onions, but I'll start with the pineapple. And again, like I said, the pineapple was on sale cut like this. I do have a nice little gadget that I use for cutting up pineapple as well. But if it's on sale for $2.99 and the work is already done, I mean, sometimes that's fine too. Just gotta figure out what makes the most sense at any given time. Okay, if anybody has any questions, please feel welcome to ask me. And once this goes to recording later today, I do plan on adding my recipes that I'm making today in the video description, so you won't have to go anywhere else to find the recipes, not my website or anything else. You'll be able to find them right here. Okay, pineapple's done. I'm going to take the larger chopping mechanism out now and add the smaller one. I feel like onions taste much better when they're chopped super tiny. I could also do the jalapeno this way too. Yeah, we'll do the jalapeno this way too. But for the jalapeno, I'm not a super duper fan of a lot of spice, so for me, I will be cutting out the majority of the pith and the seeds in here. If you like a lot of heat, you could keep all of this in. If you like a little bit of heat, you can keep a little bit of it in. And if you like a tiny bit of heat, honestly, the pepper itself without the seeds and the pith, it's spicy too. So it just depends on how much spice you like, but we like a little bit of spice, a little tiny to a little. So for us, using just the pepper itself without the pith and the seeds is plenty. I just shook seeds all over the counter. All right, kitties don't eat that. They won't eat it anyway. Okay, so the pepper's done. We can add our onion now. Where's that red onion? I like to add red onion to pineapple salsa, more so for color than for flavor. You could definitely do this with a sweet onion as well, or whatever onion you have on hand. The lime juice and the sweetness from the pineapple will definitely mellow out any of the salt too. Will definitely mellow out the onion flavor over time. So you could use any onion you like. But the color of a red onion when the dish is predominantly yellow, that's a beautiful thing. All right, something funky in that slice of onion, we'll skip that. You never know when you buy fruit and vegetables if they're gonna be fresh and nice all the way through, and if something looks funny, skip it, right? We don't wanna take any chances. All right, so I've got my onion quartered, and then I'll pop it through the 1/4-inch dice on my chopper. Okay, how are we doing on time? We've got 3 minutes to go. That's great. We'll come back to this in a second. Then I'm going to wash my hands. Then I want to get a bowl set up for brushing and get my pastry brush out. I'm going to get a bowl set up for brushing my scones with the cream. So I'll put a little bit of cream in the bowl. You won't need much for brushing cream onto scones. Probably no more than a 1/4 cup. It's probably more than enough. Oh, I think I lost. We'll find it. Okay. Oh, so they're in the fridge. We'll pull out our scones. Here they are. Here are scones that have been chilling in the fridge. I'm going to brush. I'm going to take my pastry brush and dip it into the cream and then just brush over the top of the scones. Sometimes I get lazy and try, because it's not a big recipe, I try to use a smaller cookie sheet. I'm like, oh, it'll be fine. And then they end up spreading and touching each other, and then you got to split them apart. So it really is better to use a larger cookie sheet and give them the room that they need to go in the oven. Okay, they are ready for the oven now. Now, if you wanted to add something crunchy on top, you could. You could add sanding sugar or any other crunchy little bits if you wanted to. I like to make glaze for mine, so I will be making a glaze out of confectioner's sugar and a little vanilla and a little of this leftover cream, which is going to be heavenly. But if you prefer something crunchy on top, you could do a little sugar coating, or you could even combine sugar with some oats, or you could combine sugar with some nuts and add that on top instead. Okay, we're ready to get back to our pineapple salsa now, but I am going to set the timer for 20 minutes. I like to cook the scones for about 20 minutes, and then I'll check them at that point. Again, like I was saying with the dough, baking is something you have to check. Some things change with small variety from time to time because of humidity. So depending on how much moisture was in my dough today, how much it cooled off in the fridge, how much it's, I like to check it. So after 20 minutes, they may look great. They may not have little brown bits on the edges, and I may want to cook it a minute or two longer. But I'm going to pull them out in 20 minutes and show you what they look like, and then even show you what to look for to decide whether they need to go a little longer or not. But anyway, we start with 20 minutes, and now we'll come back to our salsa. Get a bowl for it. I'm going to put it in a clear bowl so you can see how pretty it is. Set the stick to the back here. I use my metal bowls and my big blue bowls a lot, but if I'm doing something pretty, especially if I want to show you guys, I'd rather do it in a clear bowl so you can see how pretty. And all these colors are just so gorgeous. All right, so we're starting with pineapple, jalapeno, and red onion. And that's all we're going to use the chopper for. The rest of it I am going to chop by hand. I am going to add cilantro, which I've done it in the chopper before, and I feel like it just makes more mess than it's worth. It gets caught up in the teeth of the chopper, and so I end up spending so much time pulling that out. And I think by chopping, my dishwasher is clean. And I think my knife's in there. No, it's not in there. Okay, I'll have to grab a different knife. That's fine. This one will work too. So I find that I prefer to chop by hand for cilantro and herbs in general because I like to have more control over how tiny I cut them. And something like cilantro in a salsa, I want it pretty tiny. So I'm going to start by a rough chop. We're going to use the majority of this whole bunch of cilantro. And you notice I cut in the one direction. Now that I have it sitting on my board, I go in the opposite direction. And so that's going north, south, east, west, and then I might do some diagonal chops. And then pull the whole thing together and then chop in another direction. Anytime you're chopping something and want it to get fine, you just really have to have a little bit of patience. If you're just patient and make your way methodically through the whole thing, you'll find that you really do get a nice tiny dice. You may notice that I didn't rinse this first. I rinse my herbs when I get them home from the store because I do not like them to be wet when I am chopping them. They will stick together and almost form like a paste. I like my herbs to stay nice and light and fluffy when I mix them into something, and the best way to do that is to make sure that they're dry before you start chopping them. So if you're going to wash them when you get home from the store. Pack them in paper towels in the fridge to absorb that extra moisture, and then when you go to use them, they are dry and ready to go. Okay, so we've got our cilantro in there now. Probably give it a mix and see what it's looking like. It's gonna be gorgeous. How gorgeous is that so far, right? It's looking absolutely amazing. All right, one thing that you could add in here that I didn't add, but I do occasionally, is adding a little bit of sweet bell peppers for color. You could add a little bit of an orange bell pepper or a red bell pepper, and that would give you a little bit of extra color and a little bit of crunch without adding a whole lot of different flavor as well. Next, we're going to do our limes. If you wanted to, you could add some lime zest at this point for a little more flavor. I'm gonna skip it today. I just don't feel like it, but if I was inclined, that is something I could do for variation. Anytime you make something more than once, it's nice to know what the variations are, right? Because life can get pretty dull and boring when you repeat the same things over again. So even when you're making a recipe, it's nice to know what the different variations are so you can change it up from time to time. All right, I cut up 3 limes to start with. I like to start with 3 limes, and then if I feel like it has enough flavor, I'll stop at 3 limes, and if it needs more tang, I'll add 1 more, but 3 is usually where I start. If you are not a huge fan of sour, you could start with 2 limes instead. I happen to love the lime component of salsa. You know, we all have our favorite flavor things, so I would say that I probably go a little heavy on lime juice. So if you're not as crazy about lime, you might want to start with 2. And it also depends on how juicy they are. And as you might see, these aren't the juiciest limes I've ever seen. Like one of them was, and the other one was pretty dry. That one's juicy. But depending on the lime, sometimes this one's not going to be super juicy. I could tell already. Look at that. That was the biggest piece, and it yielded the least amount of juice. All right, so if you think your limes are juicy, 1 to 2. If your limes are not that juicy, 2 to 3. All right, I'm gonna rinse my hands off again. Move on to some salt. Definitely need some salt in a salsa. I would say that this is no more than half a teaspoon to start. Okay, what I like to see at this stage is the fact that between the pineapple and the lime juice, we've got a little bit of liquid pooling down there. That liquid down there, oh man, that is the good stuff. I think a good homemade salsa, you need to see a little juice in the bottom. Okay, if you're going to be using this more than 1 time, and if you're going to be serving it to more than just yourself, you want to be mindful of not taking taste testing off of your working spoon. What'll happen is the bacteria from your mouth gets back in the dish, and you can end up having the shelf life of your work not last as long as it should. Oh my God, it's perfect. It's just perfect. Okay, so we've got a little bit of heat from the jalapeno. We've got so much sweetness and juiciness from the pineapple. We've got the tang of the lime juice, the crunch of the onion, and a little bit of salt to pull it all together. That is amazing. Just amazing. Any of the tools that I use today, you can find those in my Amazon shop as well. Let's see. Does anybody have any questions? How long do we have on scones? We got 12 minutes to go. Obviously, we're not going to see the pork roast today either. The pork roast is going to take longer than the half hour or 40 minutes or whatever we're going live. But just like with anything else that you put in the slow cooker, you don't need to see the finished part. You need to see how you put it together. What did I add to the pork? I added 1 onion, 1 whole thing of pineapple. So I chopped up a whole pineapple. I chopped up a whole onion. I cut a head of garlic in half and put the whole thing in there. I can show you. And then I put salt and pepper and cinnamon in there. And you may think, oh my God, onion, pineapple, orange juice, and cinnamon, are you kidding me? No, I'm not kidding you. It is one of the most fragrant and delicious pork dishes you will ever try. It is wonderful to serve as a pot roast with just some different flavors. You could serve it with rice, you could serve it with potatoes, you could make tacos with it. It's great on top of nachos as well. Any condiments? Well, how I will be serving it is with some brown rice pineapple salsa on the side. Pineapple salsa not only is good for chips, not only is good in tacos, but it's a great condiment on rice as well. So the pineapple salsa will play a couple of roles for the next couple of days. The pineapple salsa is going to work for chips. I did buy chips in case we want to do chips and salsa. It's going to work great for tacos because we do plan on doing some tacos with the pork. But even if you just wanted to make a pork dinner plate, you would put some pork, some rice, and the pineapple salsa. Wonderful. I also cooked up some black beans the other day too. So you could do black beans with it. I do have a recipe on my website for how I do my black beans. I do them more in the style of, if you're familiar with Egyptian fool, F-U-L, that's the style that I cook my black beans. I add lime juice, garlic, green onion, red onion, and cilantro in there. Okay, we are still, let's see where we at. We're 9 minutes out on the scones. I could take a quick look. Yep, they're fine. Does anybody have any questions? Guess I could start cleaning. I was debating adding green onions to my salsa, but I think the salsa tastes just great on its own. So I guess I could package this up. I guess I could continue cleaning too while we're talking. Lily's done rice with cinnamon. Yes, I learned to use cinnamon in savory cooking in some Mediterranean dishes when I lived in the Middle East. And I've been a huge fan of cooking savory food and meat and rice with cinnamon ever since. But it was only a couple years ago when I tried one of the local Mexican restaurants. I tried their El Pastor version of pork that had cinnamon in it, and I was like, yes, I love this too. So I have always kept cinnamon for just Middle Eastern savory cooking, but now I absolutely love it in my Mexican style pork roast as well. You're welcome, Lana. I'm so glad you like all of my crochet patterns. That's wonderful. I have a brand new crochet book out, 24 crochet hats. If you haven't seen that, you can find that on my website. All right, we have a little more than will fit in this container. What a bummer, right? I guess I'll have to put it in a little bowl and grab some chips. Ah, the sacrifice, right? I do have a cute dish actually for this. Where is my cute dish? Here it is. I have one of those cute dishes that will hold sauce on one side and hold chips on the other. Okay, there's the there's the salsa on one side, and I can put the rest in the fridge now. This will fit back in the fridge now that I've got that. And I will, let's see, since I mentioned the beans too, I will definitely post a link to that recipe when I finish the video description today, because if you're looking to do like a full meal with all of the things that I've talked about today, you could actually make a really nice meal with adding the beans and the rice with the salsa and the pork. So I'll share all of those recipes in the video description later today. But in the video description, I'm going to add the scone recipe, so you don't have to go anywhere else. You can get that whole recipe right here in the video description. Okay, gonna try it with chips now. So good. I buy the lime chips too. Lorraine doesn't like cilantro. What other herb can she use? That's a great question. Basically, I think you could use whatever herb you like. I think if you like flat leaf parsley, that has a very mild flavor. But if you like something with a lot more flavor, you could also add something like basil too. Basil is delicious with different fruits. So you could also do green onions instead if you like green onions. But I would go with whatever herb you like. Because whatever you like, you'll enjoy, and because of the lime juice and the salt and the pineapple itself, it mellows out all the other flavors as well. So as long as you don't have a huge dislike for something, everything ends up mellowing out together. But if you really dislike cilantro, which I know a lot of people do, you can switch out with any other fresh herb or green onions. What cut of pork did I use? I did use a pork loin this time because it's what ButcherBox sent me. I like to, some of my meat I get through ButcherBox subscription service. Some of it I buy at the store. And this happened to be a 2-pound pork loin roast from ButcherBox, which will not need as much time to cook as some of the other bigger, more inexpensive cuts that I use. But what I showed you how to do today, you can absolutely do on any cut of pork. You could do a pork shoulder, any of those inexpensive cuts do really well with this too. The only difference is how much time you cook it when you're doing, my glasses look annoying in the light. So if you're cooking something that is a cheaper cut of meat, like let's say pork shoulder or pork butt or whatever, they usually come pretty big and inexpensive. What you want to do is cook those low and slow. So on the low setting on the slow cooker, I might even cook that overnight. You can go 8, 10, 12 hours with a slow, giant piece of inexpensive pork. Now on something smaller and more expensive, like the pork loin that I'm doing today, I'm going to do it on high, and it'll probably be done in 2 or 3 hours. I will check on it, obviously, but it's not going to take nearly as much time to cook. And again, it's just about checking it. What you're looking for is the connective tissue to have melted out. Not so much on a pork loin. This is a very lean piece of meat, but especially when you're cooking something that is more inexpensive and has fat marbling through it or fat on the outside, you can trim some of that fat off to begin with, but the stuff in the center, it needs to melt out. And you will find that when the pork is done, it will shred on its own with a little pressure from your finger. I've even put cuts of pork in there with the bone in. When it's done, that bone could literally be pulled out by hand. That's how tender the meat should be when it's ready. See, I can't read comments without glasses. Donna likes ButcherBox too. Yeah, I like ButcherBox. I like the variety. I like the anticipation of what they're going to send. I do like the quality of meat that I get from them, but I do end up buying meat at the store too. It just depends on what's going on. But I do a combination of ButcherBox and Costco for meat. I feel like of my local stores, Costco has the freshest meat and seafood that I can find. Barbara has a half pork loin in the freezer. She's gonna try this. Wonderful. If you like the flavors of what I put in there, I am almost positive you will like this. It is not overpowering, it is not super strong, but it is a mellow, warm, spiced blend. It is so yummy, so good. All right, let's see how our scones are doing. You know what we can do while we're waiting on the scones though, is make our glaze. Let's see, where is my powdered sugar? We'll get a bowl for this. All right, so for making glaze, I happen to be a little bit of a piggy when it comes to glaze, and I like a lot of glaze when I make baked goods. So you could probably do this with 1 cup of powdered sugar, but I'm going to go with about 2 cups of powdered sugar because I like to have extra glaze. It's just me. If you want to do a little bit and be a little more demure about your glaze, do 1 cup, it'll be fine. And what we're doing here is adding a little tiny bit of a liquid at a time to just barely get it to come together. So I'm going to add a couple drops of vanilla, which is optional. You don't need it if you don't want it. And then I'm going to add my leftover cream from what I brushed the scones with. And I'm going to start with 2 tablespoons. And as you can see, it's super dry, so it's going to take a little bit of time. And you'd be surprised at how much that little bit of liquid will pull this powder together, but it won't be enough. It's going to give me like a crumbly texture, kind of like when we first started the scone dough with all that shredded butter. We're getting that kind of a crumbly texture, which means we're getting close. So when you start to see that, you know it's not going to take much more. I don't want to, it's really important that you go slow with this, because if you add too much liquid, it'll be runny and then it's not going to work right, or then you got to start adding more sugar, and that's when you can really get into trouble with baking and cooking in general, is when you try to overcompensate for mistakes. So anytime you can go slow in the beginning, you can avoid those mistakes that require overcompensation. There's got to be a life lesson in there somehow, but I'm not going to focus on it. Okay, so we'll do 1 more tablespoon. We are really close now. I'm going to show you it's starting to actually come together as a ball, which still isn't right. I may end up needing a couple more drops of cream in here. And start with whatever's left in the bowl. There's our 20-minute timer, so we could actually see what our scones look like. If they are looking good, we might be done. Otherwise, they might need a couple more minutes, depending on whether or not they have any browning on the edges. Oh, they look amazing. Okay, let me grab my second oven mitt so I can really show you here, because I want to show you what you're looking for when you're pulling them out of the oven. So they did spread a little bit, which is okay, and I gave them extra space for that reason. But see how there's a little bit of browning on the top here? That's what I'm looking for. If they didn't have that browning, I would be putting them back in the oven right now. But they are brown on, a little bit brown on top, so I'm really happy with that, and 20 minutes is going to be enough. Now I have to tell you, the last couple times I made them, I'm using heavy cream, yes. The last couple of times I made them, I needed 2 or 3 more minutes at the 20-minute stage. So isn't that interesting? Everything's the same, and yet occasionally there are still variables that you have to watch out for. Can you be a little? You notice how little amount of cream I'm adding at a time. It's because once this goes from crumbly to liquid, we're done. Like it'll get, once it gets there, any amount of cream you add past that will just make it too runny. Okay, so right now I have like the texture of thick frosting, which will actually work. Because what I find is if I just put a spoon of this on top of each scone and then wait for it to melt for a couple of seconds, what I can do is then brush it all over them with that pastry brush. So I will grab my oven mitts again. bring these back over to where we're at. I wonder if I should put them on a plate first, though. If I have my spatula, I can do this. Okay, so I think I'll place them on a plate first before I start spreading the gooiness, the gooey icing on top. So, and I like to put them in that pie shape where all the center points are going to the center. I think it looks pretty. Although these are not going to last long. I'm going to be honest with you. These will not see sundown. I know Marlon can smell them already. Can you smell the scones? Marlon?
What?
Can you smell the scones?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, I can smell them. Could you guys hear him? He's in the other room, but I don't know if you could hear him or not. God, they smell so good. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's see, I've got them on the plate now. And let's see, maybe just a smidge. Okay, and then by adding the icing while they're still hot, it will melt it a little bit, and then I'll be able to brush it with the pastry brush. So are we on camera now? It's always hard to figure this out. There we go. Okay, so maybe like a half a spoon on each one. I know, if that seems like too much to you, don't do it. Use whatever you're comfortable with. I'm just being honest with what I like to do. If that's too much for you, don't do it. But doing the icing thick, I really like, because what I found is that it does end up covering the whole scone, but it doesn't run down on the plate too much. Ah, Barbara, you can't hear him. Marlon, everybody says hi. You want to come out and say hi? All right, they're going to take a second. It's going to take a minute for them to melt. They are starting to melt, but you know, just like when you're trying to melt chocolate chips, you really do just need to be patient. Let it do a little bit of the melting on its own, and then it's much easier to come in with the pastry brush to smooth it around. But what I found is when I do it this way, I don't end up getting most of the icing on the plate. It does stay on the scone, which I don't know about you, but that's a good thing. Okay, it's definitely opaque right now because it's still melting. When it melts, we will be able to see through and see the berries better. You want to come taste?
What?
You want to come taste on camera? Well, we're ready now. I'll taste on camera. I think it's from using frozen butter and making it like fluffy snow with the microplaner. But I gotta tell you, scones are often dry. These are not dry. They have that little bit of crispy crust on the outside, but they are super moist on the inside. The scone itself is fluffy and moist. You can definitely taste the fruit, but it's not an overpowering sweetness. The sweetness is in the icing, not in the scone itself, which I feel like the scone not being too sweet allows you to really appreciate the texture and all the other flavors in there. You can taste the butteriness, the buttery richness. You can taste the fruit, you can smell the fruit, and it's not until you hit the icing that you get the sweetness. I really think this is an incredible recipe. As you can see, it was not difficult to make. Really involved mostly basic items that you probably already have at home. Maybe the frozen fruit is an extra, but whatever. I don't think there was a whole lot of crazy ingredients in anything that we did today. Everything I found at my local grocery store. And like I said, later today I will update the video description with the recipes or links to other recipes that we talked about. I hope you try some of these things. If you try them, please let me know. Come back and leave questions or comments or feedback there. And if you think these are recipes that anybody that you know might enjoy, please share the video with them as well. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy day, and thank you for the questions. I love getting your questions while we're live because it allows me to give a better, fuller experience full of more information. So thank you to all of you for sharing as well. Let us make time to create, share, and inspire today and every day. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.